Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching my interview here with Magda Khalifa on my show, William Wallace for America. We had audio difficulties and video difficulties the last time we tried this. We're going to do it again today, though, aren't we, Magda?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, my goodness, I'm excited once again to have you on. We kind of rushed on as soon as your mic started working just now. So I kind of did a quick intro. But tell me something. How long have you been Magda?
Gosh, I'm almost 50 years. This
50
year will
years?
be 50 years. Yep. An
Well, you didn't say
OG.
how old. You could have said your whole life.
Right. It's all right. Oh,
It
it's all good. It's all good.
that's your real name.
Magda. Yes, I've
Yes.
been MAGA long before MAGA was a thing.
I love
It's just a little D. There's a little D in there.
There's a little D in there that changes it up, but we're
Mhm.
making I don't mean to make a pun with your name, but I want people to really notice your name because it's a very unique name, but
Mhm.
when they hear your patriotic story, they're gonna know you even more on a bigger level. And when they hear
Mhm.
about your book and your fragrance line, which I see you wearing the hat, and then
Mhm.
you tell your story about how you're helping veterans and the things that you're doing, I really think that everybody is going to love hearing about you and learning about you more. So when I met you at the NRA convention in Indianapolis, you were telling me a little bit about yourself that I think is really important, but more so how your passion for our country started. And that
Mhm.
story about you joining the military, I would love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely, William. And thank you so much for having me. So, I mean, it really started with the way I was raised. I was raised right outside the New York City area by my parents, who were both immigrants from different countries. And they really instilled a sense of love of country in me. And so I say it started at a young age. They really appreciated the opportunity to be here. And
Where were they from? You said they're immigrants. Where were they
yeah.
from?
Yeah. So my mother was from Colombia in South America, and my father was all the way across the Atlantic Ocean from Egypt.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, two very, very different countries, two very different cultures. They met in New York City dancing, like through mutual friends. So they started, their life together when they met in New York City.
And when you said dancing, was it ballroom dancing or
Yes, yes,
okay.
yeah, yeah, which is kind of cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the thing back then. It was, I think they went for lessons, or it was a social of some sort, And yeah, they met and started a family. And so I grew up under a lot of appreciation for country. We always flew the American flag, and just I could sense how much they loved it. So I grew up from a young age, appreciating being born an American. In fact, and I wrote about in my book, my father always said, like, you're so lucky to be born here. There is no limit to anything you set your mind on that you want to do, because this is the land of opportunity. And it's so true. It's so true.
well, it's
Something.
amazing because that your father, being an immigrant,
Mhm.
talked to you about being so lucky to be born in America. Even though both your parents became American,
Yeah.
correct?
Hmm.
And what's really unique is we always talk about America being a melting pot,
Yes.
but you're not only born in the melting pot, so to speak, you're
Yeah.
born from two immigrant parents from two
Hmm.
totally different countries, two totally different cultures, giving
Hmm.
you a very unique name, and they
Hmm.
raised you very American. And so I think that makes your story even more impactful when nine
Hmm.
eleven happened.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you're right. I mean, growing up in the New York City area, I mean, I wasn't the only one born of immigrants, but immigrant parents, if you will. But the fact that they came from two different, cultures, countries, kind of made it even, I guess, a little bit more unusual. Because a lot of folks, they came from, or their parents, or parents who came from the same country, so they, have that shared common culture. So I had a taste of a lot.
Yeah, I see that. Well, growing up,
Mhm.
were they like your father told you you're lucky to be born in
Yeah.
America, but did they study American history? Did they really reinforce American history and
Mhm.
say civics and things like I know we're about the same age and
Mhm.
I know growing up, I learned a lot of civics and a lot of history and a lot of very pro-American things. Did you get that same kind of rearing, we'll
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, yeah, looking back, yes, and I cover some of it in the book. Like, we traveled a lot, as a family. We would, go all over United States and overseas as well. But we always went to like the museums and the warships, and Dad would translate, meaning like the history to like us young kids, about like the importance of, the fort in upstate New York that we went to go visit and everything. So that kind of like broadened my mind, and of course, served as a lesson. It was fascinating, like to get to go see so much of America, like so much of it, and understand so much. And he was curious as well. He was what, 30 when he came over. So going on these trips, like he got to learn more about, this great country, and as children did as well. So it was really wonderful.
So
We also,
you
Mhm.
so you grew up you say New York. Did you grow up in New
Mhm.
York actually? And then
North Jersey.
okay,
So, within line of sight from the New York City skyline. So it was
okay.
great. It was great. I could get into Times Square in 11 minutes flat on the bus.
Now, when you were now, did you? I love I like 11 minutes flat on the bus.
So,
So,
yeah.
growing up, were you? I guess were you ever in the military? How did that work out with you getting in the military? I'm saying that question incorrectly because I kind of know the answer, but I was trying to lead into your story about before you actually joined the military when you were in college.
Right. Well, college, I graduated college in 95, and I got married that year as well. And both my husband and I worked in IT in the 90s, through the 90s. I was in the Microsoft track, he was in the Nobel track. So we had an ordinary life, it was a good life, dual income, no kids. And then, unfortunately, September 11th occurred, in September 11th, 2001. So he worked for a company that was on the 101st floor. He wasn't there that day, but they lost
So,
170 plus employees.
so he would have been in the World Trade Center that day.
I mean, it was one of 3 locations he worked at. In fact, I had helped him because I was in the computer field as well. And if you think back to, computer rollouts, the computer
Right.
PCs on the desk and everything, the world has changed so much since, right? I remember being up there. It was in 2000 because they were doing a big migration, Windows 95 migration, whatever the case it was. And we were working over the weekend. So I went there to help them because I had those skills as well. And I remember looking out the World Trade Center windows, those narrow windows, and seeing clouds below us.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, like wow, we are
Yeah.
way up there. So yeah, so he was not in the building that day. He did lose many coworkers. So they were the second largest loss from a company standpoint. Cantor Fitzgerald was the first because they were up so high, 101st floor. So that was obviously like
What company did he work for?
Aon, Aon,
Okay.
B2B.
So the World Trade so the planes hit the World Trade Center and you being so close, you can see the disaster. What initially went through your mind?
I mean, you could see, you could smell, you could hear. I mean, it was full senses, and numbness. Everybody was shocked, like that this is happening. Not having answers. I mean, I broke a lot of it down in the book, but I had family members that were in the city, and we lost communications, of course. Everybody, because the cell towers went
Right.
down, because the antennas were on top. So you're listening to the news, you're glued to the news, but at the same point, you're looking at it live. It was horrific, for everybody that lived through all the attacks. Now, that being said, so family members eventually made it out of the city, had to take alternate means, and came home. But the whole thing, go through the shock of everything that day, and the days afterwards and weeks afterwards, trying to help and realizing I didn't have any skills that were needed or heavy equipment or, that was needed. So that whole, we couldn't donate blood. The blood
Right.
banks were full. I was the president of my condo association at the time. So, we had to, we organized and went door knocking to make sure everybody came home. Um,
Right.
like it was just so much going on. It was unprecedented. So shock and then anger, of course, when you realize these were coordinated attacks and what was going on. And then this desire to do something, and I had computer skills, and there was nobody that was really looking for computer
Right.
skills to help the cause. So that's what eventually led me to, my saying, hey, I'm going to enlist and go and, go keep the fight overseas. Mhm.
Wait, that kind of jarred me a minute. So that's when you had actually went and enlisted in the military.
Yes, yes.
So because I know this story, and I want people to
Mhm.
want people to know this story about you. You're married. You're having a regular
Mhm.
suburban life. You're
Mhm.
kind of doing your thing. You and your husband have jobs, professional jobs. You're married for a while. You're probably at the point where maybe you're gonna have kids, and instead you say, "Honey, I'm joining. I'm gonna put a pause on our marriage, basically,
Yeah.
and join the military."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was a Marine, so
Okay,
I married him towards the end of his time in service, and part of him wanted to join as well. I mean, my goodness, you see
right.
something like this, but he chose not to. I mean, he could have, but I needed to go, and he
So what that
understood on
so
one level. Mhm.
well, he understood, but how old were you at that point?
We were about the same age. I was 29, I believe. So
So you're 29 years old and you say, "Honey, my patriotism is screaming right now. I've
yeah.
got to do something. I'm putting our marriage on pause. I'm joining the military. I'm going to go to boot camp and I'm going to go fight
Well,
overseas."
I mean, I didn't put it in those words, like I kind of, I mean, looking back, I kind of, I knew what I was doing. When I made the decision of which unit to join, I knew I was joining a very deployable unit, the softer side of Special Operations Command. Um, but it was a reserve unit, so I focused on the fact that it was a reserve unit. But I knew, and I'll be honest, like I put myself on the battle roster once I was trained and ready
Right.
and capable to go. I didn't go with my unit. I said, put me on the next rotation that's going. I don't want to sit and wait and wait and wait. So they found another unit, a subordinate unit that was heading over sooner. So I went with them. Actually, that happened both times. So
So you could have gotten delayed, but you said, "No, just put me in."
send me now. Yeah, I mean, like, why would I have left my life, so to speak, to join if I wasn't committed to going all the way? Like that's, you know.
But your husband understood. He was ready to at that point to say, "Okay, you go
He
do what you gotta do."
supported, yeah, I mean, he understood because he was a warrior as well. In prior years, there's peaceful times or, more peaceful times. But so he understood. He didn't like it, but
Right,
he understood. He, understood the desire to serve your country, especially when your country needed you, you know.
right.
hmm
And you felt at that point, your country needed you.
hmm
Country is first. You've been raised your whole life, you're raised by immigrants who came here because they love America. You
Legally,
were ra
legally, I have
with
to add.
that?
They came here legally.
They came here legally at that. They came here legally. They did it the right way. They did it the legal way. They
Mhm,
assimilated. They raised you to love America,
mhm,
and now all of a sudden you're watching, our country be, attacked. Your patriotism screams out loud. You join the military to go overseas and fight.
mhm.
This is an amazing story. It doesn't just tell a great story. It tells a lot about you as a person, but it really tells about love of country that I
Mhm.
wish every American that had this level of passion that you have.
Yeah, I mean, there were many others that did as well, I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what we saw. I
Oh,
mean, there were
absolutely.
people.
Well, I'm not.
Mhm,
I'm not saying that there weren't. That there's not a whole bunch. That there's. That I'm not even saying that most of us aren't. I would say probably most Americans are very patriotic,
mhm,
but this depth of love of country, where you put, where you're one of, you know, well, let's just say millions in history that have put their signed your name on the line to your country, a blank check,
mhm.
for an unlimited amount. There's not many people that do that level of patriotism and go overseas and fight. That's a whole nother commitment,
Well, yeah,
level.
and that's the thing. I mean, I served with so many other veterans that did the same. That did the
Yeah.
same. And, so, I mean, yeah, I mean, it was just the catalyst in my life, the timing. It just, everything happens for a reason. And it may not be clear at the time, but, I realized, yeah, I mean, because life was good, and then
Yeah.
and then when you realize, whoa, everything's changed in a heartbeat. Now we can look back 20 something years later and reflect how much things have changed and spiraled and gone downhill, and how much has been lost. So, unfortunately, but I am so grateful to have served, to have worn a uniform, to have been able to serve in that capacity at that time.
So let's talk about your time did you went to Afghanistan?
No, I served in
Wait,
Iraq. I served two
Iraq?
tours in Iraq. Hmm.
Okay, 2 tours. Let's talk about your time in Iraq,
Hmm.
because all of this, I think, shows when we eventually get to your fragrance line and your activism, part of you. I think it shows a whole other level of not only commitment, to our fellow man, but love of country. But I think when people really see the path that you've been on, it shows that more people need to not only learn more about you. We'll tell you how to get your book, but also how to find your fragrance and be able to support your endeavors, on what you've done. So let's talk about your time in Iraq.
Yeah, so I served two tours, and '04 and then '06 to '07, and they were kind of in the same area, and you could see the difference, how things had escalated by '06 '07, and in the beginning, well, actually end of '06, beginning of '07, that's when the surge operations happened, and things really got really intense. So, we with my job, I was able to, or be attached essentially to many different units, and
Right.
had a lot of different experiences doing different types of mission sets, which was really incredible. I love being a soldier. I mean, and I was getting to do what I, signed up to do, which was
Right.
really, really awesome. But of course, losing, people close to you, it just did a number on you. My battle buddy, was killed 4 days after we got to Iraq.
You're who?
My battle buddy, I'm sorry, the soldier that I was paired with, if you will.
Mhm.
We were separated once we flew into Iraq because of the logistical, the fog of war, how everything was
Right.
going on. I mean, this was in the beginning-ish part of the war, February 2004. And on February 16th, she was killed by a roadside bomb. So that I was on my way down to be reunited with her. They were trying to keep me back into Crit. That's like where I was sent to. And I
Right.
said, I didn't come here. I didn't like leave my life to join to sit behind. But because I was older and I had like experience and skills, they wanted to keep me back there. I was useful in that sense. But my goodness, so okay, they agreed to let me, be reunited with her.
Mm.
And we had the convoy set up to bring myself down there, and she was killed. So she was killed, and three others were injured. So what a way to start your, first,
Right.
your experience, right? It
When
was
you
just
when you went in, when you were in the first wave?
no. 2003 was the
Yeah.
first
Oh,
wave.
oh, that's okay. That's right.
So,
Okay.
so I went in 2000. I was still getting trained into.
Right. Okay.
It takes a while to go through your training and stuff, but I went in 2004. So it was still what I would call earlier on. If you look at the evolution of the war and the different phases and everything, based on like what the enemy was doing to kill us, like it was still early on. Our by example, like the Humvees that we rolled around in, they were soft skin Humvees. There was no armor at the time.
Right.
In 2006, 2007, we had, advanced, and we used very armored vehicles, different variations, and the doors kept getting heavier and heavier.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so I went early, really early or fairly early in the war, and then during the surge, so different experience both times. But yeah, losing her was just wow, very real. Like it made things very somber from the beginning.
You were infantry?
No, I was not infantry. I was civil affairs, which was a reserve unit in Special Operations Command. It was at the time the only reserve unit under the Special Operations umbrella. So we trained to really high standard and had a very unique mission set, but we were still reservists. Since then, they have really fully, grown out the active duty version of it. It's a lot different. It looks a lot different than what it did back then. So that being said, what I loved about that job, and this is what the recruiter told me. He said, during peacetime, wartime, you're deploying, and you are basically, you're like a chameleon. Whatever unit you get attached to, you and your team, you're going to be doing what they're doing. And I was like, that sounds awesome. Sign me up. You know what I mean? Like, of course, right?
Right.
I mean, like, okay.
So if you were assigned to an infantry unit,
Yeah,
you were infantry. If you were
many
assigned to,
different types of infantry unit, so, with, different types like 4th ID and 1st Cav. And I mean, there were so many different types. So it was great because like we operated in small teams called CADAs, civil affairs teams. So 3 to 5 man teams, really there were about 3 or 4 persons each. So I was a team sergeant and then eventually a team leader, and really got to work with a lot of, amazing units, on the active duty. They were active duty side, so they were trained a little differently. And like, we got to learn, their equipment and how they rolled. And it was really awesome. Like from that standpoint, amazing. And I try to capture some of it in the book, um, but to also, balance it with a proper respect due to some of the soldiers I served with, including my battle buddy, Specialist Nicole Fry, to keep their legacy living on, because these service members are the ones who paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect and defend our Constitution, our American way of life, and our freedoms. And we need to know their names. History needs to be preserved from that standpoint.
that is a great way to put it. All too often, the people who've put their name on that blank check, and the government or whoever wrote that check and cashed it in will say, and I don't mean that to sound uncompassionate or insensitive. I mean that just to make the analogy that, to carry that analogy, when a service person, when somebody writes their name on that blank check to the government, and then their life is taken in battle, basically, they've laid their life down for our country, and all too often they get forgotten. And that's,
Yeah, and that's a shame, and
yeah.
that's terrible, terrible.
What's amazing is that you're still you've served our country, and I'm assuming you've seen battle, you've seen probably combat during
Yes.
that time. And I'm not gonna ask details,
No, I
Yeah.
wrote about it in my book
Yeah.
because, and that's another thing too. There were so many battles that just because like war's going on, you don't have what was the name of that World War II or that Vietnam reporter that was around. You don't have somebody capturing these things, these battles, like the nuances of it. So I just felt, hey, I was, part of a little bit of history. Let me preserve it for what it's worth.
And I just now put the banner scrolling at the bottom of the screen. So
Mhm.
if anybody wants to buy your book, they can go there and buy your book and hear more about it. And that's I know there's a whole lot more details in the book, but I wanted to give a really good overview of you as an individual. When I met you, and I said this in the beginning of our interview, and I'll say it again, when I met you, you not only did your patriotism stand out, but the goodness in your heart stood out. And when I learned what you're still doing right now to be able to, like I said, keep those names alive, still have that respect for country. I thought your story of, being a daughter of immigrants, you're taught the love of country, the magnitude of your patriotism to put your name on the line. I mean, look, at 29 years old, most people are not thinking about, like, they're patriotic. They might be flying the flag. They love their country, but they're not thinking about interrupting their life at the time when they're well into starting their life to go ahead and, go put their life on the line in another country for their country. And then, so you served in battle. You've seen lots of things that most people can't even imagine. And I've interviewed a lot of veterans to hear some of these stories. When you got out of the military, let's talk about that. So when you got
Yeah,
out, when you served your
right.
tours, your time was up.
Yeah. So that's where my battle really began, was that transition period of, going from soldier to civilian again. That was, that was rough. Anything else you can get through it, right? You understand you're going to war, bad things are going to happen, right? You have an understanding of things, but coming home, there was no like plan. I didn't have a plan. It was, I did the second tour, and then I came home, and I explored a few different things, but I was like done, but I didn't know how to just process life and transition. I had some health issues that were um, revealing themselves as well, which were concerning, but not having answers was probably the worst part. So I pushed through. I was very functional. I've always been like functional no matter what's going on, whatever I'm battling on the inside.
Do
And I
you write about
pushed,
this in your book?
I do. hmm
Okay, so
And yeah, and it was about a decade of, I call it the decade of darkness, where, again, I was functional on the outside, but a mess on the inside.
did your
But
husband wait for you when you wait for you?
yeah, he did. But we got divorced.
How long after you got back?
We before I got back from my second tour, like we
Okay,
started the divorce process.
okay.
So, which is not atypical for a lot of relationships that undergo, the strain of war.
Right, so you're in war and your
Mhm.
husband's filing for divorce.
No, I was filing for
Okay,
divorce.
okay,
Yeah.
alright.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I changed a lot as a person. So, but after the first year, we were friends after that, like, okay.
Right. I think
So,
this is important because your perseverance, not a lot the story that you tell in your book and the story that I've heard from you personally and the story that you're telling now, your perseverance, your not only your patriotism and what you saw in battle, but your perseverance through the transition, even the dark years, as you call it, to be able to persevere like you have, to do the things that you've done, I think is amazing. That I think more people need to know about. So you're in this period of darkness. Do you share any of that?
yeah, no, 100%. My first chapter is like my darkest night. And that's because I want readers to see, whoa, you're coming from here. They'll probably resonate with it, even if they hadn't served. But then you turned your life around. That's the beauty. That's the magic. That's the
Yeah.
whole purpose. I didn't write a story just to tell a story. I wrote a story to serve others because I finally came to this point where I realized I'd fixed myself, so to speak, in such a great way that I turned my life around, and I needed to share how that was done. But I will say this whole like what you see in battle, like I'll be honest, like 9/11 was far more of an impact than what I saw on the battlefield. And it's as horrible as, all the terrible things happening to, fellow service members and also and Iraqis, innocents. We had interpreters that were killed in horrific ways. Like as horrible as all of those things were, the real horror was September 11th up in New York City. I mean, for me personally, like that was
Mm.
the worst. So war was therapy because it allowed me to do something, serve in a capacity that forget the politics and anything else behind all that. Like it made me feel that I was part of the world's greatest fighting force. And during the time of need for our country, I was out there doing my little part. So from that perspective, I had that perspective going in
Right.
and coming back. Right. So yeah, so it took about 10 years, but I essentially figured a few things out, being stubborn, from Jersey, right? I was stubborn.
Yeah.
Like whatever, I just kept pushing forth and figured a few
In
things
that
out.
10 years or that 10 years briefly, what did you do? Were you working? 'Cause
Yeah.
you didn't have did you have Triangle Fragrance then? Did you
No, 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 no.
that
This is
that
all
10
new.
years, it was dark where you were just surviving, or were you
No,
actually
I was functional on the outside. I worked as a defense contractor by day, by job. I was training future war fighters in the Navy and then across all forces to go ahead and be prepared to do their job. So from that standpoint, that was rewarding. So I did that for about 5 years, and then because of government bureaucracy with like contracting, defense contracting, and everything, kind of got to a point where I was paid well, but not really doing much. After about 5 years. And I just said, look, I recognized that I needed a challenge. I needed a
Yeah.
mission that I believed in. So I left and started a consultancy as a solopreneur. And I did that for several years. And then eventually while I'm doing that and, some other things, really got into functional fitness, which if I say the word CrossFit, that's what it looks like. It wasn't exactly CrossFit. It was more MMA based instead of gymnastics based, but started coaching, doing that, on the side. So I was doing these things. I started to heal. And then the whole nutrition thing, I get into it in the book, like what exactly were the steps that I
Right.
took to help myself heal. But the best thing is eventually in 2019, I found myself, because what I would do is put myself in rooms with people who were, say, super successful, and they were mentoring, people like myself. And I heard what I needed to hear. I got that swift kick in the butt, delivered to me that I needed to hear. And I realized, you know what? You've got so much inside of you and you're playing small. And, it started to really turn my thinking
Right.
around. And I was in, like I said, I got my health right. So I was able to like receive those messages and realize I
Yeah.
need to do something. So I figured I would write the book and share the value, in the story. So I started doing that. And in the process of writing the book, that's where I discovered Freedom Triangle. And Freedom Triangle, that's the framework that helps people get from where they are today to where they want to be. Okay. So it's like self-guided self-help, in other words,
Okay.
and it's the steps I took. And I'm like, all right, so the book came out and it was powerful, like even the way it came to me, because I didn't set out the book
Right.
to discover Freedom Triangle. Like I discovered it while I was writing it, which
Right.
was pretty cathartic. So then the book came out in October 2019. Mind you, this timeline's really interesting, right? So shortly afterwards, I realized not everybody's going to read the book. And I really believe in the value here. This needs to get out to others. So I thought I need a product, a physical product, because people will buy the product and then I can introduce them to these concepts. So I thought, what would be appropriate? It's got to be luxurious, powerful. It's got to be able to match the power of the self-help that they can receive if they so
Right.
choose, right? So that's where I thought of the idea of triangle fragrance, luxurious fragrances, eau de parfum for men and for women, so I can serve many people. So triangle fragrance is inspired by that freedom triangle concept.
Okay.
Mhm.
I love this. So can you explain the freedom triangle?
Yeah, so it's based on 3 points.
Okay.
So it's time freedom, health freedom, and mind freedom. And the idea is when you complete, you could come in at any point in your life. Everybody's got different paths, It's more so for adults though, not children so much,
Right.
You're still learning about life and,
Right.
executing on growing up, but everybody finds themselves, a lot of times anchored by things in the past, right? Like I did, um, the death of my battle buddy, like that anchored me in many ways for a long time, understandably, right?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, that as an example, and there were so many other things that I mentioned in the book, right? So I was able to like essentially take control of my life again, and that was powerful. So the idea is when you go through the entire framework, when you get to mind freedom, you have literally found control of your life because you have inner peace and personal freedom. And who doesn't want that,
Right.
right?
Exactly. I'm
So
all about freedom.
but personal freedom, I mean,
Right.
there's the exterior freedom, the freedom that, soldiers fight for, to
Exactly.
protect and defend our country, right? But if you're a mess inside, if you're in your own prison, like you don't have freedom,
And you
you're
didn't have that during your 10 years of darkness.
correct,
So
correct.
you got to experience firsthand what it was like to not have that mental freedom. And so you got to so you were on the other side of the triangle, so to speak,
The
not
tribe. Mhm.
or not being right mentally. And
Mhm.
so now when you're able to discover the triangle,
Yeah.
you're able to be able to say, "Hey, I know what it's like to be on the other side, so I know
Mhm.
what it's like to be correct on the correct side."
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that way to
It's
put
to
it?
be in control of my life. And that's powerful. And if you look at we are 2023, and look at how many people are on medications, prescribed or
Right.
not,
Yeah.
for everybody's saying the mental health crisis, right? Which, as we know, we both attended the NRA annual meeting. Like I had the signs from my book, like some quotes about how it isn't a gun problem. Of course, they blame the guns, but it
Right.
is, it is, let's look at the root cause, right? the psychotropic drug problem we have
Right.
here in America, looking at it from the veteran standpoint. Like when I was in some, like looking for help, if I trusted the VA to, just put me on all these medications, like my life would be completely
Right.
different. So thank goodness, again, I was stubborn. I was like, no way, I'll figure this out. Right. And I did. It took time, but I did. So it's an important message, but even more so today because of the fact that so many people are not in control of their life. They can be
Right.
successful, they can be, wealthy, they can have all these things, but they're not in control of their lives. And then everybody else as well. I mean, look at the problems we have in society today. And how are we going to have a truly, successful, prosperous country if we don't have more people become healthy and take control of
Right.
their lives and not be dependent on all of these, I use the term loosely, substances, whether it's,
What
medication,
about the
alcohol. Mhm.
But what about all the people and the doctors that swear that we need all these medications to survive? What
They're
do you
part of the
think?
problem. They're part of the problem, and people need to invoke critical thought and realize that. And I think they're starting to, or some people are starting to, and I break that down in there. And I use the example of how, again, being a veteran of this global war and terror era, Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, right? I saw what was happening. So suicide and cancer have killed more veterans, right, of my era than, combat has. That's a problem.
Right.
And everybody thinks, oh, when they hear about a veteran that killed themselves, they're like, oh, what must they have seen? It must have been so horrific. No, actually, the statistics show that the majority of veteran suicide are by veterans that have not deployed. So
Right.
do the math on that. How
But
does
they
that?
have not deployed. You
Uh-huh.
mean like they're supposed to deploy and didn't
No,
deploy
no,
or
no. They just have not been,
to war?
in right. And for whatever reason,
Right.
maybe they just hadn't gotten there yet, or they just never went there. So it's not what they saw. There's something else in there. What's the missing piece, right? And then if you look at the $7 billion in 7 years that the, Pentagon, the DoD has spent on medications, and then you see, former execs from big pharma working for the VA, in a different capacity now. Like you start to do the math and put it all together and realize polypharmacy, the over prescription of psychotropic drugs, right? Like a drug
Right.
cocktail, like that was basically being forced down these vulnerable veterans who came back, like I said, having health issues that they didn't understand. So again, for like America just needs to
And
um,
the health issues came from some of the carcinogens in the air, from
yes,
the
right.
burning of the oil pits and different things like that.
Right, it changes your DNA, right? And then here's another one, IED blasts, right? Like that's huge, right? That mortar blasts, anything that like rocks the noggin, right? So we hear
Right.
about the football players with their CTE injuries and
Right. Exactly.
suicide rate as well, within that profession and those types of sports as well. So it's the same concept. It's like when your brain, your noggin gets, rocked, right? You still drive on with the mission and gosh, but that does some damage. It really does
Yeah.
some damage. The good news is after, 2 decades, right, of war, we figured out a lot of things that
Right.
work to reverse that damage. But it's not medication. It's not psychotropic drugs.
Right.
Psychiatry has never cured anything. Okay. So, that's the state of what has happened. And that's the state of like where we're at now. We need to get that message out there to others. But again, like I said, not just the veteran community. This is something that, spills over, and you could see it just in our civilian
Right.
society as well. People are just so easy to pop pills for everything
Right.
and press the easy button. And that's not going to keep our nation thriving. And, what kind of progress are we going to have if everybody's doped up on something?
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is serve others, not preach, but show others,
Right.
hey,
I
hey,
love this. This
well,
is why I wanted to tell your story before this,
mhm,
because I think when people look at your story from the beginning of day one, they're not looking at somebody who's Johnny come lately. You jump in, you get this fix that, oh, I got this great idea about this little triangle thing, and I kind of came with the concept. Here it is. You're someone who's lived it, and when somebody hears your story, and we've covered it in just a brief interview, your book tells all about it, which I hope
Mhm.
people go to your site and buy your book, and they see all the details that connect all the things that we talked about in this interview. They see this pathway of someone who your whole life has put you on this path to
Mhm.
get to where you are now.
100%.
People don't believe in destiny. They can look at you and see, you know, two immigrants came together legally, and the path that was started at that, it got us to where you are now, where you're helping people. You didn't just create a fragrance line, because hey, I got this great story. You created something that is helping other people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, and this too, though. So, capitalism, that's a beautiful thing here in America, right?
Love it.
And people value results. And when you have an important message, but you're able to get results, right? Not in like your story,
Right.
that's an example, but like building a business, right? That's really hard, right? Um, when you're able to get results that way, it underscores the message that you've been preaching.
What kind of nonprofit stuff are you doing these days?
Right now, none.
Yeah, yeah.
I was
Well, I
involved
worded
in
it the wrong way because
probably.
you're doing things to help veterans in a lot of ways, and so I didn't know if you're doing it through a nonprofit or if you're using your book as the way that you're helping veterans.
Well, the book isn't just for veterans, mind you. I happen to be
Okay.
a veteran, right? Like everybody thinks, oh, the fragrance is for veterans, the book's for veterans. No, 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 no.
Right.
That's
That's exactly
I mean, yes, they can benefit from it, but here's two things. One, a lot of times they don't want to listen to another veteran, right?
right. Yeah. right.
It's a fact. And a lot of ones that should be listening.
Right. Exactly.
It's a majority, obviously in, male dominated space. So they may not want to listen to, a female veteran, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fine. Yeah.
A lot of them do. And, whatever. It's like, okay, it is what it is. But the whole point of the story is this is an example,
Right.
overcoming, right? Moving from here to here. That's something that can be applied across the board. I actually wrote the book, and I wrote in the book that I wrote it for younger generations because I started to recognize, again, this was 2019, how rapidly things were changing because of technology and what
Right.
we were losing in the process, right?
Right.
Okay.
And that's what I like about this. You're not doing this just for veterans. And
Right.
that was my reason for asking the question about the
Mhm.
nonprofit, is that you're trying to do this as a way to be inclusive to help anybody who needs this discovery. It's not just for veterans. It's not a nonprofit to be able to help a specific
No,
group.
no, no, no,
It,
no.
it, it's
I have
something
I'm running a business,
you have a you have
and
a you have a business that has a subset mission to help other people regardless of their background or where they've
so
come
if
from.
you look at the mission statement to provide a modern experience for you to feel luxurious and powerfully in control of your life. That says it all right there. That's
Okay.
the mission of Triangle Fragrance. So I didn't say for who it is, because the right people are going to be attracted to that.
Right.
Mhm.
But your story and your path that you followed, I think is a remarkable, story and path that's going to help everybody who finds out more about you, your book, and your fragrance.
Well, I wouldn't say everybody either. And this is
Okay.
why you can't help people that don't want help. So I addressed that early on. Are you, in the book, are you fixed mindset or growth mindset? And that's how you filter, you know, people, because if they're fixed mindset, you could tell them anything, they're not going to listen. They're not going
Right.
to take action on it. They're not going to connect with it. So not everybody who is in need and who can benefit from the power of Freedom Triangle is going to be ready to receive it.
Okay.
So it's and also too from a business standpoint, you can't serve everybody.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Right.
Hence the reason I've asked the questions in the way I did,
Yeah.
because knowing you, And having met you and having talked to you before, I knew that there were certain ways to be able to share this with other people,
Mhm.
that you could open some eyes. I think, when people see not only see your book, their eyes become opened,
Yeah.
when they realize that you're not just someone who came up with this idea, this concept. You're somebody who's lived the experience, seen it from the other side. So when you devised this, or when you came up with this, and to be able to help other people, you're not just saying, "Hey, I came up with this." I've lived this. I've
Well,
been there. I've been there.
absolutely, absolutely, because I share my story, and what you see is what you get.
Yeah, right.
You hear that
Exactly.
for good, better, or worse, and and I realized, this direct style, and also this style, um, coming from a woman, okay, may not, some people don't necessarily want that delivered to them, but then it resonates with other people who they don't look at it that way. And that's good because they're looking towards a message. And that's what it's all about. So we're all individuals, and but the whole point of this, the whole point of mentioning this is because I believe two things. We have a duty, I'll be 50 this year, we have a duty to give back in our own unique way to the next generations, to create, a legacy that lives on. Whether you have children or grandchildren or not, it's a legacy and impact on this world. And also too, I think being genuine and sincere allows you to connect with the right people, because really when someone is ready,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who you are. When you're delivering a message that they need and they want, and they're the right, candidate for it, meaning they're open-minded, they want to change something so bad, the pain or the hardship is so bad that they're willing
Right.
to change, they're going to listen. And you're just a mouthpiece at that point for a message, which, I'll take it to the next level. Like, they
Right.
say the two most important days in your life are when you're born and when you found out why. Well, I could definitely say I found out the why in recent years. For years I didn't know. I kind of just went with, what felt right. Like,
I'm here. I'm doing it. Right.
yeah, and that's fine. But once you find out why, like, nothing's going to stop you from fulfilling that. And I'll go one step further and say, my faith is strong, and I believe in what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's what propels you to keep going, you know, because I want
That's
to please the Lord. I
Yeah.
want front row VIP when I go up there.
I love it. I love that front row seat.
Absolutely.
But you see this, again, this not only now we're seeing not only your path, and your perseverance, but a glimpse into your heart.
Mhm.
That granted, capitalism is a driving factor that is just a tool, or the business becomes just a tool that we need to pay our bills, if we look at it that way. But for you, it's a greater mission than just using capitalism as a tool to pay your bills. For you, it's a greater, if I can you can tell it's a greater mission for you. It's that.
I would stop right there. I would say most entrepreneurs, maybe when they start out, some of them do it to pay their bills, but by and large, because I spend so much time with so many different entrepreneurs, it's more than paying your bills. You
Oh,
know?
no, I no, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I would never
What
like
I'm saying,
categorize, like, that's why people go into
capitalism is the
business.
tool. Capitalism is the tool, but it's the
See, I look
passion.
at it, the capitalism, I wouldn't say it's a tool to pay your bills. It's a tool to solve problems, to provide
Okay.
value in the marketplace. But words mean things, because it's true. Like, like people, entrepreneurship is hard. And if it was just a means to pay bills, like, I don't think many people would thrive in entrepreneurship. You take the definition of an entrepreneur is a person who takes great financial risk to deliver on their business. So it's much more than that. Like, I would never, tell someone who's interested in starting a business that it would be, because honestly, most
Yeah,
entrepreneurs make less than the average
right.
salaried employee. And
Yeah, exactly. It's really is a more of a way to fulfill your passion, for your
Mhm.
pa
I wouldn't say
golly,
that either. No,
I'm
if you're
striking out with you,
no,
golly.
no, no, I would never say it's a way to fulfill your passion. It's because a lot of people who get into business, and I say it all the time, because they're pursuing their passion, right? There's two
Mhm.
things that often happens, right? They lose the passion because business is hard. Business, there's a science to it, and there's numbers and,
Right.
results and, that matter. So when you're focusing on that, you're not focusing on the passion side. Now, some people, they enjoy doing something and they figure a way to monetize it and create a business out of it.
Okay.
But by and large, the successful entrepreneurs that I know, like the really, really successful ones, who've built big businesses and hired lots of employees, it's not that they're passionate about that business.
Okay.
Mhm.
No, I'm enjoying this, and I'm not, and it's not that I'm saying something entirely different,
Mhm.
because I don't think that. I mean, we could spend hours, on entrepreneurship and capitalism, and so
Mhm.
sometimes I try to say things very succinctly in a way that, in this case, didn't really, I guess, sound right. But some people have a passion for business, or some people have a passion for a product. Some people have a passion to solve a problem,
Yeah,
and
but
some
I don't know. I guess that the passion, I don't know if that word really resonates. When you're really building something, it's not a passion, more a responsibility.
okay,
That drives it because you realize, hey, I can employ people, I could solve this problem with my goods or service. So
right,
even if passion, in my opinion, like passion is more like your hobbies, like, oh, I'm so
right,
passionate about this or this cause I want to support, that's more passion. But when it comes to business, there's not a lot of room for passion. You have to
okay,
deliver results to keep going.
right.
Mhm.
But you don't think a passion in somebody's heart or their soul keeps that drive going, and to be able to persevere on their own, when the numbers or the business aspect takes over, when it supersedes that desire to solve a problem or a passion to be self-employed, you don't think
Mhm.
that passion is what drives people sometimes?
I would probably characterize it as it's their drive, it's
Okay.
their resolve, it's their commitment that gets them there,
So
not so much the passion.
then listen to I did a podcast many months ago
Mhm.
on work ethic,
Nice.
on and I talked about this in my work ethic podcast. And if you listen to that, it's about an hour long. It goes into some of the things that we're talking about, that sometimes it's a work ethic, that gets them through something like the things that we're talking about right now.
Mhm.
I think that there's a sense of passion to solve problems for some people. There's a desire to be self-employed or create your own opportunities. I think there's a lot of different things at play when it comes
Mhm.
to entrepreneurship, because I think people do it use it for different reasons.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it for sure, but at the same point too, the stats don't lie, and the business of business, if you will,
Right.
it really is all numbers driven. So,
I love it.
which is really awesome, and that's important for to be ingrained in anybody who's looking to start a business or to
Right.
buy a business and operate it. I mean, it's really, I think sometimes the things are presented in a certain
Right.
manner, and the bottom line truth, genuine truth. I think that's what really matters.
I love
It's
it.
Mhm.
Well, Magda, any final words there before we wrap up here?
Just in context of where we are today in our country right now and all the problems that we do have right now, I think we have a lot of answers within ourselves, and meaning within people who have gone forth and solved problems and done things. And if we look back at history as well and we study history, we're able to see how things were handled. And we're trying to farm everything off with
Mhm.
technology, and I
Right.
don't think that's necessarily the answer. That actually creates many more problems in many senses. So I would encourage many people who find themselves, not happy with the current climate, to get involved, at some level, and get uncomfortable, and put your your desire to see change into action by, getting involved. There's so many different ways they can do that. And because if we don't,
Right.
then we're responsible for everything that happens, or that is happening, that's destroying our country. Even if we didn't vote for that. So people need to rise up together and use your, talents and capabilities, and put some time in
Uh,
to help be part of the solution.
I love how you're saying that because was responding to somebody earlier today that was fussing about a narrative. They were fussing about a problem that, in their opinion, I'm being very succinct about this, and you got to
Mhm,
forgive me. Sometimes when I'm too succinct, I might not say it just the right way, like I talked about when we were talking about our passions, for entrepreneurship. But when what happens, this person was getting distracted with the narrative,
mhm,
and they were fussing about a politician,
mhm,
trying to do something. I won't get into that right now. And I responded. I said, I said, don't complain about what the politician is trying to do. Don't
mhm,
complain about the narrative. Use the opportunity to get involved and motivate others to
yeah,
get involved, to be able to find other solutions.
mhm,
Because sometimes the narrative is just should only be a catalyst to be able to get involved in a positive way, to have the
mhm,
conversation, to be able to find the better solution. Because when
mhm.
you're chasing that narrative or fussing about it, ain't nothing happening.
Exactly. Let me part of the problem, part of the solution.
Right.
Mhm,
Exactly right. Magda, you are amazing.
mhm,
I've had and I love, and one day we're gonna do this again, and we're gonna talk more about the triangle. We're gonna
mhm,
talk more about, we might do one on entrepreneurship, because I love the direction that you're going in with that.
mhm,
And I love your opinions, because and I gotta get to my next interview here in just a minute. So I couldn't really, develop, your thoughts on that as much as I would like to, but I really see a whole nother opportunity to get together with you again and be able
mhm.
to help other people using those thoughts.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. And thank you so much, William. I really appreciate having this wonderful conversation with you and hopefully reaching some of your listeners.
Well, you will. We're gonna have this will be on my Rumble channel permanently, and it'll be on my podcast playlist, so people will be able to watch this and listen to it again in the future. And I'm gonna talk to you after we go offline for a second. But I want to thank you again. Appreciate you, and thank everybody for watching and listening. And catch this on the podcast at William Wallace for America. By the way, trianglefragrance.com. Go check that out. And is that where your book is also?
The book's on there, or if they go
Okay.
to theamericandreamthebook.com. So
I have
there's
that one. I
there's
have that
your
one scrolling too. It just wasn't up yet.
yeah.
There it is, AmericanDreamBook.com.
Thank you.
And so catch that, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, William.
You're
Appreciate you.
welcome.